TE Talks with Guides is a weekly podcast for lovers of history, travel, and all things Italian. Welcome back, everybody, to TE Talks, sponsored by Through Eternity Tours. I'm your host, Rob Allen, and on TE Talks, we get to talk with some of the most fascinating people who make a living out of storytelling and being wonderful storytellers. Please remember that if you enjoy this podcast and the other ones that we have done, to write a review, give us 5 stars. It's extremely helpful to get the word out and to let other people know who we are and what we do. Today, we have our special guest, who is Marco. Ciao, Marco.
Ciao. Hi, everybody.
How are you today?
Very well. Sun shines.
Yes.
Spring has just begun.
Yes, I see a beautiful light coming through the windows of your apartment. I'm jealous because I'm in England, and you can see that. The sun is actually shining, but it's just not shining into.
It's not as much. It's not the same sun, is it?
No, it's not the same sun. Sure. Although spring is quite beautiful in London, but there we go. So today, to go along with our series with our YouTube videos of TE Destinations, Series 2. We had our video about Pisa and Lucca come out, and I thought you would be our perfect guest because you are not only an official guide of Florence, but you're also one of those rarities that you're an official guide as well for Pisa and Lucca, correct?
Yes, I am, correct.
All right, so can you just tell the audience, our guests, about who you are and what you do and how long you've been guiding?
Well, my name is Marco. I live in Livorno, which is a few miles south of Pisa. Mm-hmm. And I started doing this job very many years ago. It was 1997. Mm-hmm. I was still a university student. And I started working with the cruise ships, from the port of Livorno. So I started working as a tour leader. Mm-hmm. I got my license to work as a tour leader back in 1999, probably. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, I became a guide of Pisa and then a guide of Florence, etc.
That's lovely.
And since I studied foreign languages at the university, mm-hmm. At the moment, I'm working in English and in German. As well as Italian, of course, which is my native language.
Okay, great. No, just to clarify for our audience, a couple of interesting facts. So Livorno, for those of you who don't know, but and that's why Marco works a lot with cruises, is that it is, if you want to go visit Florence or many of the main sites of Florence or in Tuscany, the port town for the cruise ships is Livorno. So that's and how far away is Livorno to Florence?
Well, Livorno is like an hour and a half from Florence, and it's only like 30 minutes from Pisa.
Okay, so that's great. So sometimes cruise ships, you can have tours of people coming to you accompany them to go to Florence, or lots of times they may just go to Pisa and then come back to the ship. Do a lot of them come to visit Lucca?
Not as many, of course, as Florence and Pisa, but Lucca is a good destination. First of all, because it's not as far as Florence, it's not as big as Florence.
Yes.
And so people who have already been to Florence before, maybe for more than just a few hours, they might decide to do something else like Pisa, like Lucca, the countryside, the wineries, etc.
Sure. That's lovely. Yeah, because of course we have a lot of people who fall in love with Italy. They get their first taste. They go to Florence, but then they want to come back and see more of what Tuscany has to offer. Also, Marco, I'd love to point out to people, I think I've mentioned it before, but as you said, and I think, most of our clients are from the United States, the people who listen to the podcast, but actually they're from all over the world. But I think an interesting thing about Italy is their high schools. Already in high school, students choose a specialization, right? And as you mentioned, there's usually like a high school for engineering, for classical studies, for even tourism. And there's another one, as you said, for languages, right? You studied mm-hmm. languages specifically. And what languages were you studying? So you're a guide in German and English and Italian.
In German and English and Italian. I took a little bit of French.
As well, okay.
But I don't speak French at all. Just bonjour, bienvenue. And then, French customers are usually, of course, very demanding about language skills, etc. So never worked in French.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very, very interesting. I feel greatly insufficient if I were to give tours in Italian because, the Italian language has a different conjugation for the remote past, which of course, as a guide, you have to use the remote past when you're talking about things all the time.
It's not just a matter of language.
Yeah.
It's also a matter of different things you tell. A few days ago, I did a tour from a cruise ship. But actually, the cruise ship was not in Livorno. The cruise ship was in La Spezia, which is the other port. But La Spezia, it's Liguria. It's another region. It's much further from Pisa and Florence. So if you should choose a port, if you should choose a cruise and you want to see Florence, you want to see Pisa, it's better you choose a cruise ship that comes to Livorno and not to La Spezia. Anyway, we did a tour to a bus tour, a big group, 28, 30 passengers. We went to Lucca first, and then we ate lunch in the countryside, in a farmhouse. And the tour was English. The tour was German and Italian. 50% Germans, 50% Italians. And something that I noticed, it's easier most of the time to do bilingual tours, English and German, than German, Italian, or English and Italian. Because, of course, it's not only a matter of language, but it's a thing that you tell different things, to people. There are things that you explain to foreigners that you're not supposed to explain to Italians.
Sure. There's also the cultural context, because each culture has its own way of how they want information given to the right way approach. I remember I followed a tour once at the Vatican Gardens with my parents, and it was with a trilingual guide. She gave the tour in German or French. I think it was Italian and English. And I remember that I was like, she's not saying the same thing.
No, of course. You don't say the same things, and that's why it's harder. While if you do a tour like German and English, you say more or less the same things, and it's easier.
Okay. Well, let's get to the main point. I mean, it was a lot of fun when I did the video with Dylan, which you got to see. It was a perfect, clear day to go to the Piazza dei Miracoli in Pisa. And I was very excited. I mean, it's just so iconic when you see the tower, the leaning tower of Pisa. And I don't think many people realize that it's actually a bell tower for a church, and that the church is right there next to it. It's always.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, most of the people think that the leaning tower is a building by itself.
Yeah.
Then they go there and they realize there are other monuments next to the leaning tower, which are even more probably beautiful. I mean, not as famous, but probably more beautiful from an artistical and historical point of view.
Exactly. I mean, it's just like, well, the whole place, the whole context, the way, the setting of this, it's called originally the Piazzale del Duomo or Piazzale del Duomo or Piazza del Duomo.
Piazza del Duomo. And then, as you said in the video, there was a great poet, Gabriele D'Annunzio, back in the 19th century, said La Piazza dei Miracoli because it's as beautiful as a miracle.
Yeah, it is, because it's really, I think it's unique in the context of how it's set up, because normally a major cathedral for a town has a piazza in the front of it, but it's mostly made of stone. But here we have this beautiful church. It's one of my favorite churches in
it is.
It's like easily one of my top 10. And that's not saying nothing, because Italy is filled with some of the most beautiful churches in the world.
But
yeah, go ahead.
It's something that I always say, and I always think it's a kind of beauty that you never get used to.
Yeah.
You know what? Many years ago, I used to go to the university in Pisa, and I used to drive with a bus, with the city bus every day through the Piazza dei Miracoli, which was not yet a pedestrian area in the 90s when I went to the university. So I used to see that church every day, every morning, to reach my faculty at the university from the train station. And really, it's a kind of beauty you never get tired of, It's different. It's quieter than Florence. Florence, the cathedral is in the town center. It's packed with people, surrounded by other monuments. Pisa, it's like a place out of time. Doesn't even matter that the cathedral was built in 1063, whenever. It's something that is really completely out of time, out of everything. It's like a magical place by itself.
It is. I mean, the beautiful white marble, I believe it's marble that it's made out of. It's constructed on the outside.
See, it's actually more limestone.
Limestone. Okay.
The Pisa is only a few miles away from the Carrara marble quarries.
Yes.
They use limestone, which came from the hills that are between Pisa and Lucca. I always say you can call it either a good limestone or a bad marble. Because, bad marble, it's like a good limestone, but of course, good limestone sounds better than bad marble.
Of course. But I mean, regardless of that, it's a very beautiful, bright color. The whole complex itself is very clean, and that it has this. And I saw it on the perfect day because the sky was clear.
See, I heard the wind when you climbed the Leaning Tower.
Oh yeah, it was very windy. Well, we'll get to that and how I was terrified of being up at the top of the tower. But yes, it was the beautiful blue sky, the white of the
the marble,
high quality limestone.
Let's call it marble. It's easier. Yes.
Marble, beautiful green of the lawns, the prati. That's the other thing too. Is like you never really see such pristine lawns around in Italy because it's hard to water things. The sun is so intense, and it's just.
And what impressed me about the video is that I don't know what time of the year you did it because we met on that day.
September, I think it was.
September. It was still during the COVID, etc. So the square was not as busy as usual.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really part of the beauty. It's the other big difference. I always say cities were made by people, and cities are supposed to be seen and enjoyed in the crowd. Full of people. But the Piazza dei Miracoli, the cathedral square in Pisa, is the exception because it's so different from everything else. So especially when people come from the cruise ships, I always suggest to do Pisa first, early in the morning, as early as possible before big crowds arrive. Because unlike if you go to Milano in the Piazza del Duomo, it's nice to see the people, the crowd, the cafes, the department stores around. But Pisa is really magical when it's quiet and empty.
Yeah, no, it does. It does have a certain context without the crowds there that it does make a big difference. I mean, normally everyone loves to go there and they have to do this specific kind of photograph where if it's taken from a distance, they love to put up their hands as if they're pushing the tower. I promise you I didn't do that. But not only along with the tower itself is the church, which we'll talk about in a second, but I also love the baptistry and the kind of covered cemetery area, the Camposanto, which was amazing. I don't think a lot of people will take the opportunity to go into these places. The baptistry is beautiful on the outside and very simple with the lovely acoustics on the inside. It's the largest baptistry in Italy, if I'm not mistaken.
It's the largest baptistry. Is the only round baptistry.
Yes, because they're octagons or...
because usually they are octagonal. 7 is the time, like the 7 days of the creation, and 8 is the infinity.
There we go.
And so it's the only round baptistry. It's just been restored in the inside. I saw in your video the scaffolds. They were probably still doing some restorations. It's been cleaned, and it's really beautiful. And has this incredible acoustic,
Yes,
it's due to the structure of the roof, which was built in 2 different periods. So there are like 2 roofs, one inside and one outside, and that causes that great acoustic inside.
It's also very interesting in the video. That was a bit of a mystery because my colleague who does a lot of the filming and does a great job of the editing, Dylan loves stained glass windows, and so he had taken a shot of one. And then we got a closer look at it. We were kind of mystified.
and there was John Paul II.
Yes, John Paul II. And you can also see him kneeling over and let's say kind of crushing a communist flag and a Nazi flag. It was just kind of...
No, that's right. That's right. The cathedral square, La Piazza dei Miracoli, was very much damaged during the war. In 1944, the cemetery was hit by an artillery shot and very much damaged. And the baptistry was also hit by an artillery shot, or maybe more. If you look outside, one of the columns upstairs still has the cracks, of the bomb. So the stained glass windows were remade recently. Not all of them, but some of them have been remade recently. So one of them has a saint from Pisa. And the other one that you saw that you were talking about is about the life and the influence of John Paul II in the history of Europe.
Ah, well. Listen, can we also take a moment to go inside the church? Because I was also amazed by it, because I remember very specifically, I have an interesting story. I was visiting it with my parents and my aunt at the time. She's no longer with us, but my family is I'm not, and my parents aren't, but my mother's family is very religious Irish Catholics. And so my aunt, we came in the year 2000. So it was the Jubilee, right after you started working. And she went into the special chapel they had for the prayer. And we were stuck there for 45 minutes as she was praying through the, my mother thought, and she confirmed that she was praying the rosary. She didn't tell us, but then she decided to go through with my Aunt Jessie. But it was interesting is the church itself is kind of astounding. And when I was doing my research, when I was doing the video with the voiceover work on it, is that okay? So what I got from was that it was influenced by, what is it called? The Pisano Romanesque style of architecture on the outside, but on the inside is Pisano Romanesque, a little bit of Gothic, and also a bit of of ancient Arabic mosques was the influence of the architecture, because it's such a vast open space. And it seems that it's like raised up high. I mean, have you ever heard about that yourself?
Yes, of course. Pisa in those days was a maritime republic, like Genoa and Venice and Amalfi in the south of Italy. Pisa was the capital of such a huge empire, not an empire, republic.
Sure.
Including Sicily.
Okay.
Because Pisa took Palermo, which is the capital of Sicily, in 1063, and the tradition tells that the cathedral of Pisa was built to celebrate the victory over the Arabs in Palermo. So they took a lot of the Arabic style.
There we go.
The white and black stripes you see everywhere. Reminds me very much of the Mesquita in Spain, in Cordoba, Spain. And also the idea that both the cathedral and the baptistry are divided into two levels, ground floor and upper floor, men downstairs, women upstairs.
Yes, the Madroneo.
Madroneo, the women gallery, like in the mosques. Actually, the upper floor of the cathedral of Pisa has never been used for women, but it's again the influence. But Pisa was a big port, so they had the influences from all over Europe.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead.
Pisa is the only town of Italy that never had a ghetto, so the Jews could live and work wherever they
were never segregated. They always had a certain freedom. And okay, that's lovely to know. I didn't realize that. I think many people don't realize, when they think of Florence as being the heart of the Renaissance, but that Italy's wealth during that time period was because of the major port powers, the cities of Amalfi, Genoa, Venice, and then of course Pisa, and that Florence, I guess at some point conquered Pisa, and it's through Pisa that they became very wealthy, as always I've understood it. It was like it was Pisa that brought so much importance. I mean, all of these port towns, with their connections with the Silk Road and Istanbul, or when it was called Constantinople, were bringing all the treasures. I've always had that great fascination, and that's lovely that you point out the fact that it was an international city, great influences, and a certain sense of freedom, because of course it also has one of the most important universities in Europe, one of the oldest, if not the oldest university in Europe. Correct? It's
not the oldest, but it's one of the oldest, 1343. So it's the oldest, at least in this part of Italy, and it's a more important university than Florence, for sure. We have, it's only a few steps away from the Leaning Tower. We have the oldest botanical garden of Europe.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Via Santa Maria, the street that goes from the cathedral to the river, to the Arno. After a few steps to the right, it's a small thing, but it's the oldest botanical garden. 16th century, it was founded by the Medici, the Grand Dukes of Florence and Tuscany. Plus, there's another university called the Scuola Normale Superiore, which was founded by Napoleon, in the 19th century. It's a small public University,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really considered one of the best in the world.
Huh. Well, that's interesting to
We
know.
have a big hospital. As I always say, in Pisa, you can study everything but architecture. After the Leaning Tower, they gave up with architecture.
Well, that's one of the things that has made it so important, right? Is because of the tower. I didn't know that about the botanical gardens. I was kind of fascinated because the University of Padua also had an ancient botanical gardens that I got to go in.
It's always like a competition because in Pisa the botanical garden is older, a few years older than Padua. But unlike Padua, the botanical garden of Pisa has been in 3 different locations.
Okay.
So the actual location is not as old as Padua, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's still very old.
So listen, before we go outside from the church, because let's say we're inside the church, and
Yes.
there were some things that I learned about, but I just didn't in the editing of the video. I couldn't talk about it. But if we could talk about it here, I think it would be great. Is that we have the pulpit, and this pulpit is considered, and many people I think don't pay attention to the pulpit inside the basilica. It's considered one of the most important pieces of sculpture of the Renaissance in the world.
It's a wonderful work of art, really amazing. It was made in the early 14th century by an artist from Pisa called Giovanni Pisano. His father, Nicola Pisano, was a great sculptor as well. But Nicola Pisano was not born in Pisa. We call him Pisano because he spent a long part of his life in Pisa, but he came from the south of Italy, from Puglia, Nicola de Apulie. So when he came to Pisa, he brought to Pisa his Greek background.
Of course.
And he carved the pulpit inside the baptistry, which is still very Greek, very Byzantine. And then one generation later, Giovanni Pisano carved the pulpit with, it's amazing. You see the massacre of the innocents, and you see mothers crying for the death, for the loss of the children, or you see the flight into Egypt, and you see the Virgin Mary doing what a real mother would do, So because you see the Virgin Mary on a donkey, and she holds Jesus Christ so strong, and she takes care of him, she caresses him. So it's really the idea that the Virgin Mary and the other human beings are finally depicted with feelings, because before everything was so emotionless.
Yes, exactly, without emotion at all, and then that's what the Renaissance goes into, right?
And the pulpit is so modern that it was not appreciated at all. Giovanni Pisano, the sculptor, wrote an inscription at the base, which says, "My name is Giovanni. I made the pulpit by myself."
Wow.
And I described in this pulpit not just the stories of the Bible, but the entire stories of the world.
Wow.
And it's really amazing. It's really amazing because it's a real twist in the art history. The idea that the saints and the prophets are finally depicted as human beings. And this is like 100 years, at least 100 years before the Renaissance in Florence.
Yes, it's like figures like him and Giotto are the ones who are starting to put emotions into what they're creating, right?
And it's amazing because, Giovanni lived and worked at the same time of Giotto, the painter. They also worked together. You mentioned Padua before. They worked together in Padua.
I had the Scrovini Chapel.
In the Scrovini Chapel. Giotto did the frescoes and Giovanni used some of the sculptures. But nevertheless, Giovanni looks really more modern than Giotto.
Sure. It's like it holds up over. Yeah, of course, because when you look at Giotto, one has to explain, because it still seems, compared to painting, how it progressed, that his figures are a bit static in the movement, but the sculpture is completely different.
There's more movements and feelings. And nobody appreciated the pulpit, because I told you it looks so different from what people expected, from what people wanted to see. At the end of the 1500s, there was a big fire in the cathedral. which destroyed the building completely. So the ceiling of the cathedral was remade after the fire. The pulpit was dismantled into little pieces and was recomposed only in 1926, 24, because I told you, since people didn't appreciate it in the past, nobody took care of restoring and
Isn't that amazing? It's amazing to think. I mean, now it's considered to be such a treasure, such very important, and then it's almost figured out. Well, that's just one piece. But then another thing is the beautiful mosaics in the apse, and that I had studied that the face of Christ was probably one of the last pieces done by Cimabue in the working of it, in the design of it. He died in Pisa, and that was one of the last pieces he ever worked on.
Cimabue, that's true. That's actually the face of Saint John, and it's beautiful. The mosaic was begun by one artist who made the Jesus. Then Cimabue did the Saint John.
So Cimabue did the face of Saint John. He didn't do the face of Christ.
John, the one that Jesus Christ is in the center, Saint John to the right. And that's what we do.
There we go.
And it's the last work by Cimabue. And it's the only work by Cimabue that we have a documentation. We have documents proving that Cimabue was really the artist who made it.
Well, I mean, yes, again, so you have these lovely pieces. And then, of course, the Camposanto itself is spectacular because you have beautiful frescoes along with these wonderful graves. I think people should really take a time to go in there because it's also another place that is very unique. And it reminds me, because I used to have a great fascination with what they called circus form churches in ancient Rome, like these ancient early Christian churches that don't exist anymore, circiforme churches, because basically they're considered to be covered cemeteries. And that was reminiscent to me when I went to go to see the Camposanto. And we have these images of the graphically violent, the devil eating figures and
the devil, the hell, the paradise.
Yes.
It's beautiful. It's a work by Buffalmacco.
Yeah, exactly.
Florence. Not really a great painter.
No.
Not as great as Giotto or the others, but the frescoes are really impressive. As you said, the devil, the triumph of death triumphing over human beings, human life. And another thing that the cemetery is famous for is the incredible collection of tombs of the Roman age.
Yes.
Which you certainly notice. And that was the most important attraction for visitors of Pisa back in the 19th century. People didn't go to Pisa to see the Leaning Tower. People went to Pisa to see the tombs of the cemetery. Amazing. Because, in those days, like nowadays, most of the travelers came from the north of Europe, like from England, from France, from Germany. And Pisa, of course, is closer than Rome.
Sure.
It's 300 kilometers less. So people went there. They couldn't see, of course, the Colosseum. They couldn't see the ruins of the Roman age, but at least they had this incredible collection of marble graves from the Roman age.
Why did they have these marble graves of the Roman age?
Why not? Because
sorry?
Pisa, it's something that rich people of Pisa, they wanted to be buried in ancient funeral monuments.
Okay,
so they went to Pisa, they went to Rome, or wherever. They took the tombs and reused them as funeral monuments.
Of course,
it's something that was done in many different ways in Pisa. Like if you walk around the cathedral outside, and you look at the walls of the church, you see every now and then pieces of inscriptions from the Roman age.
Okay.
Because, the cathedral was built reusing, and some of the columns inside were reused from older Roman buildings. They did it to save time and money, as they did, with the ruins of the Colosseum in Rome, which was dismantled piece by piece. But they did it also to create a connection, between the power of Rome in the past and the power of Pisa in the Middle Ages.
Of course. Of course.
So we leave those inscriptions visible on the walls of the church, so everybody knows that the cathedral of Pisa that the glory of Pisa comes from the glory of the ancient Rome. And rich people of Pisa wanted to be buried in those ancient tombs of the Roman age.
Well, that makes sense. Well, next time I come out through there, I have to have you come with me and take me around to see it, because I would love to. I really enjoyed the entire complex of the Camposanto. So let's jump over to the tower. I'm sure, well, you've been up to the tower yourself, but for me, it was very, very exciting because I had always wanted to go. When I first came to Italy, it was not open to the public and it had been closed for many years, but I think it's been open now for about 15, 20 years. Or...
20 years.
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah. I remember, because I've been doing this for a long time myself. I remember that there were clients telling me, oh, we got to go into the tower, and I was very jealous. So I finally had the opportunity to go up. I don't think I'll ever go up again, but I mean, it was beautiful, but it's a kind of amazing because the fact that it is leaning, it almost gives you this impression that it has this kind of movement on it. And I am
as you go up. Yes.
Yes. You know, with the wind, it was a very windy day. So yeah, I was having fun, let's say, going up to the top. Of the views were spectacular. Because there are so many things about it that it's leaning, and I'm always interested because, you know, a lot of places, there's another leaning tower in Pisa. In fact, we have a blog talking about things of Pisa. I can send this blog too, because we have a great blog writer that it has another leaning tower in Pisa. But, you know, Italy is filled with leaning towers. I think Pisa is the most famous because it also happens to be the most beautiful. Rome has one, and it's right in the middle of the city.
In the forum, the brick tower.
Yeah, exactly. The Torre di Milizie. You know, it's the
Trajan Market.
Yeah, it's right behind the Trajan Market. It's monumentale. You know, I think, or, you know, a lot of people don't realize that in the Middle Ages, people didn't live in palaces. Families lived in giant towers to protect themselves and control their territories. But that one leans a bit, but it's not as pretty as the one in Pisa.
It's not as beautiful. But the one in Rome is a medieval tower.
Yes.
It's not a Roman tower. It's a medieval.
Yeah, no, it's not a Roman tower. It's a medieval tower.
I've never heard. Yes, never didn't know that.
Yeah, there was a lot of towers in Rome, but most of them were cut off. You know, I learned that recently too. It's like from the when we were doing our video about San Gimignano, that the reason San Gimignano's towers are still there is because it had this kind of economic crash. When everyone was finding
after the plague and yes.
Well, it was after the plague and after they were finding saffron from Far East, because San Gimignano was a great producer of saffron. It was very, very rich. And so when other towns had a lot more money, they were pulling down their towers and making great Renaissance palace, but they did not have that luxury.
Pisa used to have many towers before.
Yes.
There is a little street in the center of Pisa, not far from the river. It's called the Via delle Belle Torri, the street of the beautiful towers. And they were designed like in San Gimignano, you know, towers of rich people. You know, the taller the tower, the richer the people. Yeah, and of course, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is not a private home. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is the bell tower of the cathedral.
Exactly. I actually rather enjoy that when I go through Rome, is to find, because these towers still exist. They've just been cut off to be at the equal height of the palaces around them. So they're kind of hidden within the streets, but there are a few of them that one can still find. But let's jump over to Lucca as well. So just to talk a little bit about Lucca, you did mention, and you and I met in Lucca for the first time. I rather enjoyed that too. It's a beautiful city. I think they've done a wonderful job because the walls of the city, which I believe date back to the Renaissance, have been kind of converted into a kind of beautiful park atop the walls that you can have a wonderful time strolling around them. And then it has these the Duomo, the Cathedral of Florence of Lucca, and also the Church of Saint Michael have that beautiful facades of, with the angel up at the top. Can you tell me just a little bit about the town itself? I mean, do you like Lucca?
I like Lucca very much. And when I go there, I have a complete, with my clients, with groups, with families, I have a completely different approach, you know, because Pisa, the monuments, you see, Pisa have been so extremely important for the history of Europe, you know, because it's really the rebirth of the entire European culture after the Dark Ages. Nothing had ever been built before. Nothing that important had ever been built before the Cathedral of Pisa. Lucca, it's a town of small things, you know. You mentioned before the cathedral, San Martino. You mentioned the church with the statue of the angel on top. They are both beautiful. Probably they're not as impressive as the Piazza dei Miracoli in Pisa, but they are wonderful. So the idea of Lucca is more than mentioning dates and years and events and scientists and artists. Is more the idea of getting lost, like when you go to Venice. It's the more or less the same feeling.
Sure.
The idea of walking in those little streets, taking pictures, this narrow alleys, and it's a completely different atmosphere. It's a more you know what, the cathedral square of Pisa is no longer a real place, It's only for tourists. It's only tourist cameras, people pushing the tower, fridge magnets. Lucca is still a real place. And from this point of view, it's probably the realest town of Tuscany. Things are changing. There are many more tourists every year, but you walk in Lucca and you can still hear locals. If you walk around the Leaning Tower, Pisa, you don't hear locals, So it's a more real town. And as you mentioned, the city walls, which is the big pride of Lucca. Lucca is the only town of Tuscany that was never conquered by Florence.
Really?
Florence started with Pisa, then Florence conquered Siena in the 16th century. Lucca has always been independent because of the city walls.
I never knew that.
It took 150 years to complete the walls. And after the construction, the walls were so impressive that Florence didn't even try to conquer Lucca. So they built the city walls for nothing, actually. They were never used in a war.
Well, that was good, though. I mean, it did its job, right? For the intimidation of its magnificence and its construction.
They were so intimidating that they were never used.
That's lovely.
And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the other big difference, I told you, places like Florence and Pisa have always been famous, important, like Rome, like Venice, important touristic places since ever. In the past, in the 17th, in the 18th century, whenever. Lucca is a place like San Gimignano, which has been discovered recently. So from this point of view, is also more authentic than Pisa or Florence.
This is true. I agree with you. It's a really lovely town. You have this kind of authentic feel when you go there. You do get to see the locals going around. You have to see a lot of beautiful shops around as well. Of course, it's like we went there for just an afternoon, but you could tell that I think one could have a really lovely time.
The idea, the feeling you have when you walk in Lucca is that Lucca, unlike Pisa, is a very rich town.
Yes.
As you said, those wonderful little shops that you don't really expect in such a small town. Of course, if you go to Florence or Milan or Rome, you expect beautiful shops, but Lucca has always been has always had a stronger economy than the rest of Tuscany. They made the silk before. That's what made Lucca so rich. And nowadays, it's a little sad because nowadays they make toilet paper instead of silk.
Is that what they do? I didn't know that was an industry.
No, seriously, if you take the highway, the autostrada from Lucca to Florence is full of paper, toilet paper factory. Instead of silk.
I had no idea that industry. I know that as guides, we have to study the industries around. Like Rome is famous for its ceramics, like tiles for bathrooms and stuff like that. But and farming. But I didn't know that Lucca was known for making toilet paper. But it still is really well preserved. We had such a nice time. We didn't include some things in the video in Lucca because it got to be too dark and we didn't want to have the contrast. But we finished up the day because it's a Roman town. And we finished up the day having cocktails in the amphitheater, Piazza del Teatro. We got to see some of the ruins on the inside. And then, I have to thank you because you gave a lovely recommendation of a restaurant that was right outside.
The one outside of the amphitheater.
Yes, it was. It was, I could say, what's wonderful about Italy, and believe me, because I live in London, in London, you cannot get cheap food or you can get in Italy, and especially places like Lucca, you can have just really great food at a really fair price. I think not overpriced.
No, that's right.
It was so good. It was go ahead.
No. So something you said before, that you stopped for an aperitivo and then you ate dinner, whatever, in the restaurant. It's something that you do more in Lucca than in places like Florence or Rome. Because if you go to Florence for just a few hours, as you did with Lucca, there are so many things, so many monuments and churches to see that you don't really feel like sitting down and relaxing.
Yeah.
While Lucca is a town, you have a walk, you go on top of the city walls, you see a few shops, you enter maybe those little churches, and then you feel that you can finally relax a little bit and enjoy more the flowing of time. It's a more relaxing.
Yeah, I think it's probably for people who don't know and who are interested in coming to Tuscany. I think it's a great base of operations. Like if you want to stay for a couple of weeks around near Lucca, because it's a great location. It's not too far away from Florence or Pisa or the Cinque Terre. It's a great place to be able to experience the rest of Tuscany, I would think, if you want to.
No, that's true. We mentioned the port of La Spezia before, the cruise ship. So if you come on a cruise ship and you dock in La Spezia, probably Lucca, it's a much better option than Florence. Because, the journey is much shorter. And as I told you, it's a more relaxed place than it's a town you visit with a completely different attitude than Florence.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in fact, I remember the next day after I met with you, we then went off to Cinque Terre, which was beautiful. And I'll be doing that, working on that today. It's going to be the next video that we have coming out is the Cinque Terre. And that came out really nice because we were able to use the drone with that. But anyway, Marco, please, I would love to thank you so much for your help in participating with this podcast. It was wonderful. I'm sure our listeners really do appreciate what a difference it makes when you have a guide from the area, from Livorno, an official guide to take them through these places. I think it just adds that special experience. It takes a trip, a journey up to another level. I think many people, if they went to these places without someone like you, it wouldn't be the same, and they wouldn't have an appreciation, because I really like your point of view about things, the way you explain.
I think when you hire a guide, it's not only the things we can tell you, the informations we give you, but it's also the way that we know where to go, what to see, how much time you spend in one place, how much time you spend in the other place. So if you go with a guide, you won't waste time, and that makes a big difference, especially if you only have a few hours to visit a place.
Yes, that is so true. Remember, people, when you do your tours, you always have to, a guide is a font of information, not just for history, but for great places to eat, where to go, what time to go to places. It's just something that should never be wasted at all. But anyway, Marco, I look forward to seeing you soon, and that hopefully we'll be having more people come to Pisa and Lucca and be able to enjoy your services when they do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Grazie.
Thank you for listening to our TE Talks with Guides. We have a new episode every Wednesday. Please subscribe to get an alert when each podcast comes out. Rate us and tell people how you enjoyed it, and share it on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Most importantly, if you enjoyed it, send us a feedback about the show. Also, if you are curious about what some of these people and places we talked about look like, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the video on this podcast, where we have inserted special images for you to further enjoy the story.